It was 1589, and the most powerful woman in France was facing a death so painful it could bring tears to the toughest executioner. Catherine de' Medici, the Queen Mother with an iron will, had been the hidden force behind French rule for decades. Now, she was suffering a slow and agonizing end, almost as if it was a cruel punishment for a lifetime filled with scandals. What you're about to hear will flip your perspective on how those at the top can fall hard. For over 60 years, Catherine had pulled the strings in French politics, arranging marriages, sparking wars, and, some claim, plotting assassinations, all with the skill of a grandmaster chess player. She'd navigated through religious wars and political chaos, surviving countless attempts on her life. She earned her place as one of the most powerful rulers of her time, yet nothing could shield her from the true enemy, her own body turning against her. The same woman accused of poisoning her foes was now slowly being killed by her own flesh. Those who watched her final months couldn't help but notice the grim irony. The architect of so many deaths was stuck in a body that had become a prison of torment. This isn't just another royal death story. It's a real medical nightmare that shows just how brutal 16th century life could be, even for those in control. The surviving accounts paint a disturbing picture, so unsettling that many historians prefer to skip over the gory details, opting instead to focus on her political impact. What makes Catherine's death even more horrifying isn't just the physical agony she endured, but also the mental suffering of a woman who was fully aware of her body's decline. She had to watch herself slowly fall apart while still alive, a fate that feels like some twisted form of justice. The medical reports and eyewitness stories from her last year read like a horror story straight out of the Middle Ages. The top physicians, the smartest men of the time, were helpless against the nightmare unfolding inside her. They were left as shocked spectators, documenting her tragic decline. Get ready for a dive into one of history's most unsettling moments. Picture a dying queen's last moments, where power, pride, and the rawness of human life come together in a chilling dance. Catherine de' Medici was born into the influential Medici banking family in Florence in 1519. At just 14, she landed in France as the bride of future King Henry II. This marriage wasn't just about love. It was a strategic move to strengthen France's ties with Italy. But Catherine brought something more than just a dowry. She had a sharp political edge that would shape the French court for years to come. When her husband died in a jousting accident in 1559, Catherine found herself wielding unprecedented power as Queen Mother to 3 kings, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. During some of France's most chaotic times, she became the real ruler. The French wars of religion were raging, and Catherine maneuvered through it all with savvy diplomacy, along with rumors of poison. Her knack for using toxic substances against her enemies gained a legendary reputation across Europe. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Stories of perfumed gloves that could kill with a touch, deadly poisoned books, and strange Italian potions that could mimic natural death. Whether these tales were true or just fueled by fears of a powerful woman doesn't change how people saw her. Catherine was a queen wrapped in death. The French court was a tangled web of scheming, where just staying alive often meant being able to dodge assassination attempts. Nobles hired food tasters, avoided gifts from enemies, and constantly feared the quiet strike of a poisoner's hand. In this atmosphere of constant dread, Catherine was the most protected, yet the most suspected figure in the kingdom. Her approach to politics was brutally realistic. She could easily swing between Catholics and Protestants, aligning with whoever would best keep the crown safe. This adaptability made her enemies all around. Each side believed she was secretly plotting against them. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572, where thousands of Protestant Huguenots were killed in Paris, remains one of the most debated episodes tied to Catherine's legacy. Whether she was the mastermind behind the chaos or just powerless to stop it, the bloodshed that spilled onto the streets of Paris that August became part of her haunting story. By the 1580s, Catherine's once iron grip on French politics was slipping. Age and sickness were taking their toll. But who could have guessed her final foe would be her own body? It all began in early 1588. Catherine started bleeding irregularly, something her doctors dismissed as just the normal signs of getting older. At 69, she had outlived many from her time, so minor health issues didn't raise too many eyebrows. But soon the bleeding got worse, happening more often and hitting her with intense pain in her lower abdomen. No amount of opium or herbal cures brought her relief. Catherine, who had faced down political rivals without flinching, found herself doubled over in pain when she needed to be strong. She had to excuse herself from important meetings. The court doctors were puzzled. Back then, they didn't really understand the ins and outs of internal cancers. The constant bleeding, rapid weight loss, and increasing pain didn't give them the clues they needed. Their go-to treatments were bloodletting, purging, and endless herbal mixes, which only made her condition worse. As the months went by, Catherine's mysterious illness started to change how she looked, shocking even the toughest of her courtiers. The powerful woman who had once terrified kings was now withering away, her body turning gaunt and her eyes sunken. The pain grew so unbearable that she couldn't stand for long, forcing her to handle state matters from her bed. Even sitting up became a struggle, often making her lie on her side while dictating letters, her voice wavering as pain washed over her. The worst part? Deep down, she knew this wasn't just a passing illness, it was getting worse. Week by week, Catherine started to realize she was up against something her clever tricks and royal power couldn't fix. The feeling of helplessness was likely even more crushing than the physical pain she endured. This was a woman who had once shaped nations, now finding herself powerless against a horrific illness. Modern experts believe Catherine likely had advanced uterine cancer, a disease that would have been a death sentence in the 16th century. The tumor was growing unchecked in her body, causing terrible pain and a series of complications that turned her into a walking nightmare. She suffered constant bleeding as the tumor tore through blood vessels, leading to internal hemorrhages. This drained her strength and left her weak and anemic. Without things we have today, like blood transfusions or iron supplements, Catherine's body was slowly losing the oxygen it needed. She felt weak, dizzy, and struggled to think straight. As the tumor kept growing, it pressed against other organs, making her suffering even worse. The pressure on her bladder caused painful and frequent urination, while her intestines were blocked, leading to chronic constipation and bloating that only added to her misery. Perhaps the most horrifying part? The tumor began to decay, literally rotting while she was still alive. This nasty process released toxins into her blood and created a terrible smell that even her most loyal servants found unbearable. Witnesses described it as similar to the stench of a dead body, an especially cruel twist for someone accused of causing many deaths herself. The decaying tissue also opened up Catherine to infections, which brought high fevers and sent her into delirium. During these episodes, she'd babble about her past, revealing secrets she normally would have kept hidden. All the blood loss, toxin buildup, and infections combined into a medical disaster that no one at the time could fix. Catherine was essentially trapped in her own failing body. Catherine de' Medici faced a drawn-out death from poisoning, not by an enemy, but from her own sick self. It's a heartbreaking situation, especially since even with today's advanced cancer treatments, a case like hers would still have a grim outcome. Back in 1588, her condition felt utterly hopeless. Her living space transformed from royal elegance to a place of death. The smell from her decaying tumor grew so strong that even seasoned courtiers struggled to stay near her for long. They had to hold perfumed handkerchiefs to their faces during meetings. Meanwhile, her personal servants, loyal and caring, kept looking after her despite the unbearable conditions. They talked about changing her sheets multiple times a day because of constant bleeding, and trying to burn huge amounts of incense and herbs to cover the awful smell of decay that seemed to cling to her skin. The emotional toll on those witnessing her decline was immense. Tough soldiers, who had faced many horrors in battle, were reportedly sickened by the sight and smell of their dying queen mother. Some of her longtime advisors chose to avoid her completely, opting to handle matters through others, rather than confront the nightmare she had become. Catherine knew how her illness affected those around her, adding to the mental anguish on top of her physical pain. This was a woman who once commanded respect with her power and fear, now reduced to evoking pity and disgust. Witnesses noted how Catherine would catch people flinching away from her. The humiliation and anger that crossed her frail face were nearly as painful to watch as her physical suffering. She still had enough awareness to grasp what was happening to her dignity alongside her body. The loneliness that came from her condition might have been one of the harshest parts of her decline. A woman who had spent years surrounded by courtiers, advisors, and followers found herself growing more and more isolated. Even her closest confidant struggled to stay by her side for long. Her living space, once a hub of French political power, became a place people only visited out of necessity. It turned from a symbol of authority into a chilling reminder of death's inevitability. As Catherine's health declined throughout late 1588 and early 1589, her mind started to wobble. She'd swing from being completely lucid to experiencing feverish delirium that uncovered her deepest fears. During her clear moments, she was still the sharp political strategist who had ruled the French court, penning letters and making decisions with the same careful thought that had marked her reign. But those delirious episodes became more common and disturbing as the toxins from her decaying tumor built up in her body. Witnesses claimed that during these times, Catherine would engage in fervent conversations with people who were long gone, even arguing with her deceased husband Henry II about politics or begging her dead children for forgiveness. Most alarmingly, she started confessing to crimes that had never been proved, describing poisonings and assassinations in graphic detail during her fevers. Her attendants jotted down bits of these confessions, leaving historians to wonder if these were true admissions of guilt or just the ramblings of a mind fraying from intense physical pain. Her delusions often fixated on the victims of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, as if she were reliving that bloody night again and again. She would shout warnings about imaginary Protestant plots or plead for mercy from unseen accusers, her voice trembling as she fought off shadows conjured by her crumbling mental state. In one especially unsettling episode noted by her doctor, Catherine vividly recalled how she had chosen specific people for assassination, sharing details about their methods and motives that had never been documented before. Whether what she revealed was real or just her mind spiraling into darkness is one of history's creepiest puzzles. The mental agony she experienced during those shaky moments was made worse by her knowing she was losing grip on reality. At times, she'd apologize to her attendants for the odd things she'd say when lost in delirium, even if she couldn't recall what had slipped out, filling her with anxiety over what secrets might have come to light. This mental breakdown marked the end of Catherine's carefully crafted public image, peeling away years of political strategy to expose the deep fears and guilt haunting her throughout her ruthless rise to power. The last stretch of Catherine de' Medici's life in January 1589 was nothing short of a horror story that pushed the limits of human endurance. As her uterine cancer approached its final stages, her body began to fail, each organ collapsing one after the other, leaving even seasoned doctors shaken by the sight. The bleeding became relentless, essentially turning her into a constant source of blood loss. Her bedding became soaked just hours after being changed. With such a significant drop in blood volume, her heart raced wildly, struggling to pump the dwindling supply to keep her vital organs functioning, making her pulse visible as it throbbed in her neck and temples. Her kidneys, overwhelmed by the toxins swirling inside her, began to shut down, causing her legs and arms to swell grotesquely while her blood became poisoned with waste. Blood loss and kidney failure created a bizarre situation where she felt both dehydrated and bloated. As her liver fought to deal with the toxic overload from her dying tumor, she developed a yellow tint to her skin, an unsettling golden shade that gave her an almost ghostly appearance in the flickering candlelight of her room. Her once sharp eyes became cloudy, dulled by the shadow of imminent death. In her final days, issues with her breathing added another layer of misery to her unbearable state. Fluid built up in her lungs made each breath a battle, producing a wet rattle with every inhale. You could hear the suffering from across the room, a constant reminder that her body was failing her. What was even more cruel was that her nervous system was still intact during this breakdown, which meant Catherine was fully aware of every painful moment. She felt herself dying bit by bit, her mind trapped inside, fully realizing the horror happening in her own body. The doctors noted that she would sometimes plead with them to end her suffering, but they had no way to help her and didn't feel they could act on her wishes. They were left as powerless witnesses to her slow agony. On the 5th of January, 1589, Catherine's final hours were filled with violent convulsions that went on from dawn until the afternoon, a scene so disturbing that even her most loyal attendants had to leave the room. The seizures probably came from her brain chemistry falling apart as toxins built up in her blood. People watched in shock as her body arched backward during these attacks, her spine bending so much that it seemed like it might snap. Her limbs flailed wildly, needing several servants to hold her down to keep her from hurting herself, though at that point it hardly mattered. Between seizures, Catherine would briefly regain consciousness, screaming names of people she had supposedly sent to their deaths. Her voice echoed through the palace, creating a chilling atmosphere among the courtiers. Some said she seemed to react to invisible accusers, defending herself against charges that no one else could see. The most haunting part of those final hours was her moments of clarity. During brief pauses between convulsions, she would suddenly look at her attendants as if she recognized them, her rational mind surfacing for a short time before being dragged back into chaos. In one of those lucid moments, she even whispered to her confessor that she could see flames surrounding her bed, despite there being no fire. Whether her terrifying visions were due to a failing mind or something else is up for debate. But the fear in her eyes was real, palpable to those who saw it. As the afternoon dragged on, her seizures came more frequently, and they grew much stronger. Catherine's body seemed to convulse nearly non-stop, twisting in ways that no human should. Her final seizure kicked off just after sunset, lasting nearly 2 hours. When the tremors finally stopped and her labored breaths faded away, the silence in her room was heavy. People later said it felt as if the air was holding its breath, waiting for the nightmare to finish. In the moments right after her death, it was clear just how traumatic this had been for everyone around her. The doctor who was there couldn't shake the experience and ended up suffering from what we'd call PTSD today. He couldn't practice for months and eventually left court service because he couldn't escape the nightmares of witnessing the suffering of royal patients. The servants who looked after Catherine in her last months needed a lot of spiritual support from the court chaplain. Many believed they had seen something beyond just illness. The smell that lingered in her chambers was so strong that they had to close off the rooms for weeks while trying to air them out. Even then, some people said the stench never really went away. News of Catherine's gruesome death spread like wildfire through European courts. Diplomats and nobles who had seen or heard about her conditions passed the story along. Each retelling added extra layers, turning her medical ordeal into a cautionary tale about divine justice and the perils of absolute power without morals. Protestant reformers across Europe jumped at the chance to use Catherine's death as proof of God's judgment against the mastermind behind the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Pamphlets circulated, detailing her suffering and painting it as undeniable evidence that divine retribution, although sometimes delayed, was always on its way. Even those who supported Catholicism found it tough to defend the idea of justice in her case. Catherine's death really seemed like cosmic justice. The way she supposedly used poison against her enemies and then suffered a slow decline from internal decay felt too aligned to just be bad luck. Many thought a higher power was serving her a twisted dose of karma. This had a deep and lasting effect on the French court. Nobles who thrived on scheming and betrayal suddenly started to tread more carefully. It was as if Catherine's fate became a cautionary tale about the dark side of ambition. Her passing didn't just signal the end of her influence. It showed that even those at the top are vulnerable to forces they can't control, humbling a whole generation of would-be puppeteers. Catherine's medical ordeal also sheds light on the state of 16th century healthcare, even for the elite. Despite having access to some of the best doctors in Europe, Catherine received treatment that would make a modern doctor cringe. The medicine of the time, like bloodletting, purging, and toxic metals like mercury, likely sped up her decline instead of helping her. Her doctors believed her symptoms meant her body was out of balance, so they pushed these harsh treatments on her, essentially torturing her in the name of care. The autopsy after her death, though crude by today's standards, revealed a large tumor that had taken over most of her reproductive organs. The examining doctors noted tissue that was as black as coal and incredibly decayed. This suggests advanced necrosis and infection, making survival impossible even with modern medicine. The records from her case, kept safe in court documents and medical writings of her time, offer historians and medical experts a rare glimpse into advanced cancer progression from the pre-modern era. Her symptoms and the timeline of her decline paint a vivid picture of her suffering. Catherine de' Medici's experience closely matches what modern doctors would expect from untreated uterine cancer. One of the cruelest parts of her struggle was staying mentally sharp even as her body fell apart. Unlike other illnesses that often fog the mind while wreaking havoc on the body, Catherine's tumor kept her intellect intact, while it slowly broke her down physically. She also faced deep social isolation. In noble circles, being physically weak was seen as a threat to political power. The very strategies Catherine used to control her world left her when she couldn't show strength anymore. The records from her last months offer researchers valuable insights into what it was really like to be a 16th century noble and the heavy toll of terminal illness during a time when pain relief and comfort care were almost non-existent. The shocking nature of her death rippled through history, impacting how people view medical understanding, historical narratives, and popular culture even today. Her struggle became a template for how later historians and storytellers depicted the deaths of other controversial figures, promoting a tradition that associates suffering with moral judgment. The detailed accounts of her decline pushed medical literature forward, inspiring doctors to document cases more thoroughly. While the science behind her illness wouldn't be understood for many years, Catherine's death has appeared in numerous historical fiction works, often dramatized in various ways. Writers have tapped into her tragic story to boldly explore themes like power, corruption, and justice from above. Many emphasize the metaphorical side of her suffering, rather than sticking to the grim historical medical facts. Recently, experts have taken a fresh look at Catherine's death. They argue that the focus on her pain shows broader ideas about strong women. Some people felt a strange satisfaction in seeing a powerful female leader brought low by her own body. This view suggests that highlighting the gruesome aspects of her death reinforces old beliefs about women's roles in politics. Today's medical historians talk about Catherine's case to show how far cancer treatment has come and how much better care for terminal illnesses is now compared to 400 years ago. Her suffering, while important in history, is also a reminder of the progress we've made in medicine. You can see how her death impacted later French rulers in the history books. Many of them clearly worried about their health and mortality, fears that trace back to the stories of Catherine's final days. Her death stands out as a well-documented case of how political power means little when faced with the harsh realities of biology. It's a lesson that still echoes in today's talks about leadership, death, and what it means to be human. Catherine de' Medici's last months force us to face some tough truths about power, suffering, and mortality that go beyond her time in the 16th century France. In those final days, everything that defined her life was flipped upside down. The woman who had once shaped nations found herself powerless against her own body. The master strategist, who had directed countless political moves, became an unwilling participant in a medical drama she couldn't control or alter. What's particularly haunting about Catherine's death isn't just the physical agony she faced. It's the mental anguish that came with being fully aware of her situation. She had to endure the complete collapse of her dignity and power, while still understanding every humiliating detail, creating a suffering that feels almost crafted by fate itself. Catherine de' Medici's final illness was a harsh reminder. No matter how rich or powerful you are, you can't escape the weaknesses of the human body. She spent years thinking she could control life and death with careful planning and tough decisions. But when it came down to it, biology has its own rules, showing no respect for anyone's royal status or political schemes. Her death highlights just how limited medical knowledge was in her time. Even the richest and most influential people couldn't do much when serious illness struck. The treatments she endured would probably be seen as more cruel than helpful today, only adding to her suffering. What's even more troubling is how her pain became a spectacle for others. Stories of her agony circulated among the courts of Europe, treated like proof of divine retribution. This blend of personal horror and public drama shows how humanity often reacts to the suffering of the powerful. The woman known for using poison spent her last months literally poisoned by her own body. A twist so eerie it feels like a story. Yet history confirms that Catherine de' Medici's death was actually more terrifying than we might think, standing out as one of the most vivid examples of how the mighty can face the most humiliating and painful ends. In the end, her legacy isn't just about her political power or rumored wrongdoings. It's shaped by her gruesome death. A death so awful that it still shocks us after 4 centuries. It reminds us all that power is just an illusion, and we're all vulnerable to the same human conditions that connect us.